materials afterwards oh, there we go. Perfect. Just heard it go up. Okay, awesome. So we'll share the details out for folks after as well. You can go back and kind of hit pause and check on any section that you want to re-listen to, and also check out the slides as well. So kind of by way of introducing how this sort of project got started, a lot of folks know Albert's List of the community. There's a big Facebook group, but we also run events on a regular basis. We've been doing that for quite some time. I actually go quite a ways back with Albert. I joined the Albert's List community in 2013. And then in about 2.5 years ago, I became one of the moderators for the group online. Elisa and I also, kind of work in that same group lead or community lead role. And so about 2 years ago, we started running these 8-week boot camps. And it really came from, talking a little bit about kind of the process of finding a job. And so a lot of that came from Albert's sort of head, right? He had done a lot of work to build this community over the last few years. And what we really began to understand was that there was kind of a method to the madness, right? There's so much work that goes into, the job search process. And of course, also leveling up as a professional and really kind of growing yourself in your career. And we begin to see that there was this pattern. And that's kind of where we devised this 8-week program. And we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end because we run this boot camp a few times a year. The next one's going to actually start in late January. So of course, we'll share some info at the end in case you're interested in joining that cohort. But we're also hoping to kind of really just share some insights that we've gathered throughout the course of running this boot camp and helping folks, learn and acquire the skills and the knowledge and the practice to really, go out there and be successful in their job search and hopefully to accelerate it. And we really actually have, we have seen folks go through the process and get job offers in 8, 9, 10 weeks. So it does work. So I mentioned a little bit about the community. If you're not familiar with Albert's List, it's job search community. We've got 46,000 plus job seekers, hiring managers, recruiters, career coaches, all sorts of things that we do around supporting the job search. Most of you are probably familiar with that, but if you aren't, please make sure to go check out the community because there's nothing better than a really supportive and strong community. And I think Albert's List really defines that in a lot of ways. So a lot of folks know Albert, who's the founder. I'm kind of head of our bootcamp programs as well as one of the leads for the group. And then Elisa is one of our group leads and moderators for the community as well. And we all kind of support the process of building and supporting the community as well as the boot camps specifically. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some of the skill sets and the things and insights that we've learned that are, I think, relevant to people who are kind of in different parts of their career. We'll talk a little bit about like how you can kind of especially build your early materials and kind of get started if you're a college student or a new grad. If you're a junior or maybe mid-level, early, mid-career and you're wanting to level up, we've got some good insights for that. And then, for folks who especially are maybe thinking about transitioning into tech or shifting from one industry to the next, there's lots of good insights that we can help to kind of provide as well. And I think when we think about kind of like the reasons for this, this project that we've been running for the last couple of years, doing the boot camp and some of the insights that we've learned in these 6 weeks cohorts, what we're really seeking to do is to help people accelerate their process because there's no complete shortcut. There's a lot of things that you have to do, right? You have to make sure your materials are on point. You have to make sure that you kind of understand enough about networking. You understand enough about, interview prep and things like that. And then obviously, like as you get into the process of interviewing and then, getting down to offers, how do you assess them? How do you negotiate? I mean, a lot of those things are, there's some standard versions of them, but a lot of those things are kind of hard to decode. And, our job and the way that we really see what the boot camps have done and kind of what we try to do in the Albert's List community in general is to just help people accelerate that process because we never want to be in a place where people don't feel like they don't have a chance, right? They feel like, oh my gosh, I'm just not even sure where to start. We want to help you know where to start and how to accelerate your job search. And so what Albert does is talks a little bit about kind of the hiring hierarchy. That word always trips me up. And the way to think about it is if you have all of your kinds of pieces sort of put together in that hierarchy, you'll be prepared, whether you're, starting out your career or leveling up, et cetera, to kind of put everything to work. And so, a lot of times people think about the middle of that stack, right? We think about the skill sets and the tools and the ability to, do the particular work for a given role, but we might not know as much about, like the dynamics or the vision piece or the metrics piece, how to communicate with our coworkers or colleagues, how to really do a good job of assessing what's important to the team or the organization at a high level, and how to exhibit those leadership type skills. And so that's a big part of what we're going to talk about through the next few slides, is how to like put all those things together. And so I'm going to walk you through kind of like the week by week process for how we recommend folks to kind of go about really putting those pieces together as they think about it. And of course, we'll talk a little bit about that in the context of the boot camp at the very end as well. And let me pop over and just check chat really quick. Feel free to drop questions in as you go here. Awesome. Love that. Perfect. Thank you, Elisa. And feel free to ask questions about specific parts as we go through this presentation as well. So the first week that we always start with is called Understanding You. And this is sort of the bottom of that pyramid we were talking about. I think there's something here that, sometimes these feel like buzzwords, but the reality is that you have to be able to answer some basic questions about like who you are and what you want, where you maybe are in your career, or if you're starting out, where you are there, and what you're kind of hoping to do. And, resilience is a really important part of that because, just being really honest with you, just brutally honest, like you're going to hear a lot of no's. That is absolutely part of the process. And being able to be, positive and build good habits and develop resilience is just absolutely an important part of the job search. It's also a really important part of, onboarding into a new role once you start a job too, and, developing good relationships, et cetera. But resilience is an incredibly important part of it. And that's, why one of the things that we always recommend when people are just starting or maybe restarting their job search, you got to take care of yourself. That's where that emotional support, making sure that you are taking time to take care of who you are. If you don't, have peer support, making sure that you're looking for other folks who are job searching or in your fields, you've got some peer support. Maybe you engage your therapist if you haven't had one before, or if it's been a while. Maybe you get a coach, but just having a few different pieces around you that help you be really supported and resilient. I know that sounds really obvious, but I just have to share that because I think it's really important. And when we see people be successful, it's because they're resilient. And they're resilient because they have support and have a community. And that's a big part of what Albert's list is about, is a community, right? Go out there, get support, meet people who are they've been where you're at, or they are where you're at. And just having folks that can help you feel less isolated, I think is a really important part of the job search. Lisa, did I miss anything in there? I know I always kind of tap that one extra because I just feel like it's just really important.
No, I think you did a great job. And I have, coming from sales background, it's always a numbers game for me. And so I feel like you're just in it for the long haul, and it might be, I don't know, applying to 50 job applications to get the 10 callbacks, to get the 5, like quality or ideal interview processes. And then you get that dream offer. So, our team is definitely here to support you in that journey. We've worked through it with many job seekers. And so I ask that you take a leap of faith and you go with us on this journey, and you just kind of, like Joe was saying, you just stay positive in knowing that there'll be ups and downs in that process.
Yep. And be realistic too, right? There are those times when, like, if you have 3 or 4 interviews in a row, it could be a lot of energy to go through, and it's hard, right? It's hard to do that process. And so sometimes you need to take that extra day to just take care of yourself, or you need to just have a conversation with somebody who knows you well, can kind of help you decompress. So another aspect of that, the understanding you piece, that first big block, is kind of knowing where you are in your career path. And, you don't necessarily have to have all the answers, right? Like, let's say you're shifting from one track to the next, or maybe you are just starting out, just getting out of school, or getting out of a boot camp or a certification or something like that. And the goal is to be really clear about where you want to land. And so you might, your identity, who you are and where you're going, might be like, here's 3 examples, right? One example could be just finished school for UX, and I'm looking to really explore how to use, my skills as a UX designer. And I want to be in my first role for at least a year in a place where I can, do something that involves, social emotional learning or something like that, helping people feel good. Cool. If you can get it to that point of clarity, then someone can say, oh, I have this really cool app that I know of, or there's a whole bunch of apps in this space, like head Headspace, I think it's called. Something like that would be great for you as a UX designer. Let me tell you about their program, right? Or you could go look up the early career program at Headspace or another one of those apps that tries to help people, take good care of their health. So the more you know about where you're at in your path, even if it's just like, here's what I want to explore because I'm new or I'm transitioning, answering that question is really, really helpful. Another piece at that pyramid is character. And, it's incredibly important. I already kind of touched on this, so I won't go too deep into it, but just being willing to get out of your comfort zone, being able to focus on the things that you can actually control and not getting sort of spun out into, we've all been there in the doom scroll, right? Or the doom swipe, where we're like swipe, and we just kind of zone out. The internet and social media can be a drug at times, right? It kind of functions that way. And so we just have to be careful to take care of ourselves, focus on what we can control, and just be really, especially in the job search in general, but especially in the job search, make sure that you're getting the right info and the right people around you. I think because we talk a lot about that commitment, we'll talk about this, about the job search process and the boot camp that we run at the end a little bit more, but it is kind of the old adage, you get out what you put in. Could it get any more boring? But it's true. It's very, very true. Consistency is incredibly important. It's about finding accountability for yourself. And one other thing I would say in the practice, right, in building the habits and being committed, it's not being overly judgmental about yourself. And that's something that we see in this boot camp as we've been running this for the last couple of years. And this is consistent with people who are, very experienced, people who are super new in their career, people who are transitioning careers, people who don't come from tech, people who've been in tech. We see the same thing, which is people who are committed to the process, don't judge themselves, just be understanding, wow, I didn't get it done today. I had a bad week or had a bad day. It was tough. It happens. That's why you have the support around you. Accountability is about being in momentum or being in motion and keeping momentum and saying, yeah, I'm going to get right back on it. That's okay. I'm not going to judge myself too much. I'm just going to get right back into it, stay in a good mindset where I'm willing to do that work. So I think that commitment piece is so important to establish, in that first week, as you kind of get yourself and you get really clear on about what you really want to do. So the second week that we always run in the boot camp is about mastering fundamentals. And I think this part is going to be a bit more obvious. It's a lot of the stuff that you're probably used to, kind of hearing about or seeing. And so this is like fundamental skills stakes. And so one piece is creating an inventory. And I'll share one thing that I think Elisa may be good to kind of chime in here too. So you get that first week done, right? You're like kind of getting your intention in place. Okay, understanding you, it's about your identity, the path. What do you want to explore, where you're going? And then you need to really like see what you have to offer. And that's where creating an inventory comes in. This is such a critical part of the job search. It really is kind of like if you're a carnivore and you maybe eat meat, it's like the meat in the middle of the sandwich, right? And if you're not a carnivore, it's sort of the main dish if you're, vegan or vegetarian, what the case might be. But it's a really important part of the job search. And I think this is one of the hardest parts. But if you do it well, this becomes kind of the material or the fuel for your entire job search. And so this is it, right? This is the fundamental social media presence, having your quick elevator pitch, being able to say, oh, tell me about, someone says, tell me about yourself. Cool, great. Well, let me just share a little, happy to be able to share that in a minute and a half to 2 minutes. Of course, having the traditional resume and cover letter, obviously important, being able to do some of the networking associations, and then, kind of knowing what you want and where you're looking to find a job. That's like core. This is the bread and butter work that you're going to do, throughout the course of the job search that I think most people are familiar with. Elisa, did I miss anything? Any thoughts? Anything you want to add? Because I know you and I talk about this section a lot.
Yeah, this area I'm really passionate about, Joe and myself, because we will be diving deep into it. We'll give you all the technical aspects, to rework your resume, cover letter, templates. And the whole goal behind this is when you're part of the group, it's a soft landing for you. You can try, come up with different elevator pitches, practice within the group. You can have one-on-one sessions with myself or Joe just to talk through scenarios. And the whole idea is you get a lot of practice and perfecting all these areas so that when you're actually doing the interview or, cold email, hard ask, you feel really confident going into it. So that's, for me, it's all about the confidence piece. You go into it, you know exactly what you're doing, when you should be doing it, and all of those pieces fit into landing that dream job.
Yep. Yep. And one thing to add to that too, because this does come up, and it just made me think about it. Like, sometimes people ask this question of like, what about if I'm kind of going for a couple of kinds of roles? Totally doable. But of course, then you kind of have to have two sets of materials. So I just wanted to mention that, like, it's definitely possible to have a job search that sort of it's not like you have to have the absolute perfect job in mind. I think the more focused you can get, to the point Lisa was just making, the better off you're going to be in terms of matching like what you do, who you are, your identity, what you're up to, what your path is, plus your fundamental materials. Then you go into your, applications and interviews, et cetera, which we'll talk about. The more you can match that, the better. It is possible to sort of run a couple of different tracks. You just have to be very disciplined about doing it if you're going to do it that way. So resume fundamentals, I think Lisa will have something to chime in here too, but I think the big takeaway is always like, people have to be able to scan it very quickly. That's the 6-second rule. There's nothing more important than this. Like, if I'm a recruiter or an HR or people ops person, or even hiring manager, I really don't have a lot of time. And I've been a hiring manager, so I've known sort of the challenge of sorting through 60, 70, 80, 100 resumes. Like, that first scan, I'm just trying to understand who seems like they are in the right neighborhood for this role that I'm hiring for. So I'm trying to pare it down to the top 10 or the top 15. Sometimes the ATS or the job software will sort of rise stuff to the top. We talk a little bit about that process, kind of message matching, et cetera. Tools like JobScan. If you haven't used JobScan, it's just jobscan.co is the website. Great example of a tool you can use to kind of message match, or make sure that as you're filling out your resume or finishing your resume or personalizing it for a particular role, that you kind of match it to that job description. Elisa, thoughts here? I know this is definitely an area of expertise for you.
No, just I'm super excited about this. We have specific sessions dedicated to this, and we want to do a lot of workshopping. So we're going to be presenting some templates that we know have been able to land folks interviews in areas they want. And as Joe mentioned, you don't need to go after a specific area. It could just be a couple different tracks. It could be a couple different casts in the iron. It's all just about what it is you're looking for and how we can help you get there. So we'll have templates, we'll go over examples of best practices, and then we really want to help you workshop through, okay, bullet points. How can we help you make them more succinct? And then on a more, bird's eye view, or 50,000 feet, what's kind of like your brand? What's the story of you? And as Joe was saying, a lot of hiring managers they're trying to tackle 5 things at a time. They just want to get a sense of who you are as a person. Can you get the job done? And is there that confidence level there? Then, okay, let's move forward and, bring this person on site or move forward in the interview. And our goal is to help you get there more efficiently.
Yeah. Speed up that process. That's kind of, because it is work, right? There's no question about that. And, I think part of that, like, we talk about kind of taking inventory, right? Is just having self-awareness to kind of look at the fundamentals. And, people ask like, oh, I'm switching, transitioning from one career area to another. Totally doable. Most of the time, you're going to have some type of experience that you can, even if it doesn't look exactly like what's on the job description, you can find a way to match it. Very, very often that's the case. And then Lisa kind of touched on this as well, but this is also kind of part of the challenge that you have, right? And we work through this a lot, is, just making sure that you're clear on your basic places that you can be found online, making sure that your resume and your LinkedIn are aligned, your personal social media, whatever you might be choosing to use. Maybe your Instagram is private, you keep that, locked down. Your LinkedIn obviously is probably one of the fundamental ones you're always going to keep public. You want the ability for people to kind of quickly glance again here, know that they're going to scan it and go, okay, who is this person? What are they about? Are they basically fit for this role? Okay, cool. Seems like it's in the right neighborhood. And so that's a big part of like just having a basic presence. You don't have to go overboard. It's awesome if you're doing a lot of networking, but even if you're not doing a whole ton of it, you can still kind of have a basic set of, that personal brand presence that works. The other thing, and I think this is something that, we have really spent a lot of time focusing on in the boot camp, and we've certainly talked a lot about it in the Albert's List community over the years, especially in the last couple of years. In the past, people have sort of, bemoaned the challenge of, finding, jobs online, whether it's Indeed or LinkedIn or, ZipRecruiter or other kinds of recruiting sites. The reality is you kind of got to work a bunch of angles. It can be very helpful to find jobs on sites, but it's very, it's very common. I feel like, actually put a 1 in the chat if you've been ghosted by an application you applied and you never heard back. I feel like I would be shocked if, there we go. I'd love to see our chat popping up. Yep. Someone raised their hand if they haven't been ghosted by a job application. I seriously could not imagine that hasn't happened to somebody. So we all know that pain. And the reality is, like, it's hard. But the goal is to be out there kind of finding opportunities and building your outreach and your networking around, roles that you're interested in, and not just, being like, well, I found 50 jobs and I applied to 50 jobs and that's it. I never heard back. We'll talk a little bit more about networking. There's a big part of that, but basically finding ways to build relationships into those roles that you're interested in. It could not get more important than that these days. So week 3 and week 4, we always focus on interviewing. So this is sort of like, you've gone through the process of, and let me just kind of refresh it. That first week, you're understanding right? You're building your goal. Here's what I'm up to. Here's where I'm going. Here's where I'm at in my path. Here's where I hope to go. Week 2, you're doing that fundamental stuff. You're getting your materials together. You're kind of inventorying your skill set, what roles you could fit, et cetera. And then you're actually starting to do some outreach and applying. Weeks 3 and 4, you're interviewing and you're figuring out what's at stake across the aisle. And I'll talk a little more about the networking piece, because there's a bit about that too that kind of help you figure out, what's at stake too. And I think we'll have enough time where I'll even show you just a tiny little peek at what we do when we work hands-on with folks around kind of outreach around, particular role that you're applying for. So you're in that 3rd or 4th week. There's this really standard process that happens. A lot of folks know this, but for some folks, this might be a little bit, newer. You apply, you get that first call back or that first email. Typically, you're getting a recruiter screen, almost always 30 minutes, standard 3-4 questions. Normally, it then kind of works through this process where you're screening with the person who's the actual hiring manager. You might be put into a conversation with, potential colleagues that you might work with, or maybe people who work across from that role in another department. Oftentimes there'll be some type of assignment or homework. So they might say, hey, we want to just see how you think. Here are a couple of quick questions. How would you answer these? Or how would you approach this problem? Very common to have that kind of question. And then often there's some type of conversation with folks around the team that's a little more culture focused, basically to kind of feel you out and also to help you understand who is, sort of who is on the team, who you'd be working with, and get a sense of, what the culture is and the style across the table too. So this, process then sort of typically leads into offer negotiation. People have different opinions about the length of these things. I've seen them go 3, 4, 5 rounds. I definitely recommend trying to keep that process moving as fast as possible, because the more you let that, kind of lengthen out, the longer it can take and the more energy that takes from you as a job searcher. So this is a very kind of common process or that we see with folks. And it certainly flexes in different directions. Elisa, any thoughts on the kind of the interview process?
No, I think you covered it. I think, again, just want to say that we have sort of a systematic approach for this. And our goal here is to make you feel very good about, okay, when you get that recruiter screen, what are some things you can do to be a really sharp candidate? Following up, post screen, how can you get yourself to advance? Or if you've been ghosted by your hiring manager or recruiter, what are some other things you can do? We will cover all of those, and including templates on how to approach prospective colleagues, hiring managers, all of that. So it's just a matter of making sure that for you, there's not a lot of guesswork involved.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. It's a process, right? And that little tip at the bottom I love And what I'll show you all at the end when we're finished with the deck here is I'll show you this thing that we run in the boot camp. I'll just literally open it up and we'll take a look at it. And I'll show you a couple of examples of how you could do outreach right to people who you might potentially be working with to kind of help you get some insights, build those relationships. And I can honestly tell you, most people don't spend the time on the process. They miss pieces, right? And the more you can do all of these things in a very disciplined, regular way and build a habit, the higher, likelihood you're going to get a good offer that you're going to want. So one thing we always mention about interviewing that's kind of about two big things. One piece is it's about mitigating risk. So this is actually true in both directions. You're getting to know somebody and, you're going to go through this process. They're going to hire you potentially. And, then you're going to start and we'll see how it goes, right? There's no perfect way to know exactly how that relationship is going to open. And so goes it in the other direction, right? You might interview with a company and they seem super cool and you get there and it could be kind of a toxic workplace, or maybe they're not as good at what they, internal communications they sort of painted themselves to be. Right. And so it's kind of about understanding each other and mitigating risk. And then obviously you also want to paint yourself as the best hire, which is really about messaging match. It's about saying, oh, I see what challenges you have. I understand from this process of interviewing, I'm getting a sense of who you are, who the team is, what the business is, what the products and services, how you work together. And I want you to understand like where I can see myself fitting in. The more you can get the conversation to that place of like, wow, that's a great problem. One of the ways I've approached that kind of problem is X, Y, and Z. I could see myself doing something like A, B, and C, which I think would help. Like if you're in the conversation and you're understanding the context of what's happening across the table, you're really going to get the better outcome. And so, one thing we always say is pretty much every question in an interview is kind of about this. It's like, can we trust you? That's the mitigating risk. And also like, are you a good match? Are you going to be able to come in here and kind of really dig in, painting yourself as the best hire? So a lot of times you get different kinds of questions. So basic and informational. You'll also get situational, which sometimes leaps into behavioral. Like, tell me about a time when you made a big mistake and you had to fix it. Trying to understand how you deal with pressure, right? We've all been there. Sometimes that kind of leans into the more, standard, nobody loves these questions, but like, tell me about your biggest strength or weakness. Like, I'm not a fan of that question personally, but those things can happen. And then you also get to these sort of hypothetical questions, which are a little bit more about like analytical ability, right? Like, how would you figure out a problem if you didn't even know, there wasn't an obvious answer? There's also a process of making sure that you ask questions back across the table. And so we talk a lot about like, obviously the basics, right? Ask about timeline, ask about next steps, confirm the salary range and the compensation, find out how you're going to be evaluated in the goals, and then look at culture, future management, et cetera. One of the best questions that actually kind of covers the last two categories here are asking a question like, okay, really excited about this role. The person who's in this role, you hire them. At 6 months, like what will they have delivered that will make you feel like, yeah, we made the right choice? Ask a question like that. It's going to give you an answer to this performance question. And it'll probably also give you an answer to this, company team culture. Like, well, we want the person in this role to have driven X, Y, Z result, by 6 months and really feel comfortable and able to, communicate with internal stakeholders, develop presentations, blah, blah, blah. You're going to get some type of culture question in that process too. Let me pop back here because I realize I missed one of the Q&A, and I think, Lisa, you've got a whole bunch of the questions here. Okay, Lisa asked, is this a general job search boot camp or specific camps focused on industry sectors? We have a general one that we're going to run in January, which is what we're chatting about, but we do also have specific ones as well. So we have one that we are actually, I think, just finishing up for marketing here over the next few weeks. So we have both general and specific. Awesome. All right. So mitigating risk, these are some of the kinds of things that come up. Very common. People want to kind of know what you're about. They want to know that they can count on you. That's really important. And, they want to know that you understand what's at stake. And, Albert talks about this a lot. I think a good way to think about this is what you want to kind of understand is sort of what are the challenges across the table? Like, what are the communication styles and the working habits? Where could you add to help make those better? What do you already have that could help you plug in and kind of just quickly utilize the communications and the styles across the table that are, that are already happening that you could help just kind of plug into and work with. And then just understanding the biggest challenges and opportunities and problems across the table. That's, if you can have that conversation, you're going to basically already be kind of mitigating the risk for them. And sometimes, the stakes can be really high across the table. So being able to answer questions like this are quite important. And by the way, we'll talk a little bit more about this at the end too, but, figuring out what the stakes are across the table, can include things like kind of looking up and quickly creating like not in any great detail, but a chart of like, okay, if I'm going in there and I'm the product marketing manager or I'm the, customer success manager, like who would I be working with, right? So do that research on LinkedIn and on Google to figure out who those people are, get a sense of how they work together. Oh, cool. Well, I found 4 or 5 people who seem to be working around this role on the team or on another complementary team. So-and-so has been there for a year. So-and-so has been there for 6 months. So-and-so has been there for 4 years. Get a sense of like how they actually work with each other. Try to figure out what happened the last time they launched a new product or a new product feature. Or maybe they had a big mess up. They had a really serious problem that happened 6 months ago. Take a little peek online and try to figure out how they solved it, right? Is there any kind of information where they, had to write a blog post explaining to their customers, we made a big mistake, but here's how we fixed it. Here's how our teams work together. There's a lot more out there than you might think to help you kind of understand the stakes across the table and how people work together. And then in the 5th and 6th week, we talk a lot about navigating change and building leadership. And this is the squishy stuff. This is EQ, right? Emotional intelligence, kind of understanding how people work together. And this is sort of the top of that pyramid that we were looking at, at the very beginning. This is like that. Sometimes this feels a little like, oh my gosh, there's a lot of buzzwords here. But this is the stuff that even if you're early in your career, you can really look at how to connect to people. And so, this is like really core stuff like, hey, and let me give you an example. Chatting with someone the last couple of days who's applying for a role at Discord. If you don't know Discord is like a community online. It's going to compare it to Reddit. That's not quite right, but it's online communities and there's voice and chat apps and things like that too. They have a very specific vision for who they are and how they operate. And so if you're going to apply to a company like Discord, you need to be able to answer a question like, one of their values is autonomy, right? They value the ability for people on their team to be able to build independently and to try things and see what happens. Like, cool, you have an idea for how to fix this problem. Sketch out how you're going to approach it, and then let's find a way to do it, right? That's the kind of company they are. That's what they would say. And so you need to be able to kind of align yourself and say, that's my vision too, right? I like to explore new things. I like to have the autonomy to try things and to collaborate with people and see what happens. And yeah, sometimes I fail, right? That's the reality of that kind of environment where that's encouraged. So being able to have that conversation and attach to their vision is a really important, part of that process. The other things that are really important are, this is something we talk about in the context of the resume a lot, but just really be able to point at your quantifiable business impact. What change are you going to drive? Now, I'm a marketer, so I'm not going to bore you to death with marketing metrics, but one of the things I always look for is I don't worry too much about like vanity metrics. I'm thinking about growth, right? Like if I can grow this audience by X size and I can get that audience engaged to Y percentage, then the outcome is, month over month or year over year, we'll be able to drive, X percent of those people will be, engaged users or customers or whatever the case may be. Like being able to think in that way where you're really quantifying impact, really, really helpful. Leadership. I talk about this a lot in the context of like situational leadership. Leadership is actually not really defined. There's a whole other seminar we could run about this, of course, but it's not defined as this person who tells everyone what to do. It's defined as a person who can listen and understand what's important to people, very important in the job search process, and then influence people. And it's very like situational leadership is very much based on the idea that you understand and kind of assess any given moment and figure out what's the right person to plug in here. What's the right tool? What's the right strategy? So that context driven part. And then we right at the end, we talk a lot about in boot camp about kind of the offer letters and negotiation process. This is when you're right down to business. It's really like the bread and butter of deciding, kind of it's the right fit. You get an offer letter. I always tap on this to remind people, make sure you get a formal job offer. Until you sign it, it can be rescinded, and it can be rescinded after. It's pretty rare, but until you get that official offer, do not stop searching, right? Keep adding stuff to your queue, right? Keep making up opportunities. So often we talk about that process. We talk about the terms of the offer. How do you negotiate salary and other kinds of things? It's all about preparation. It's, you don't, once you get to that place, if you haven't prepared, it's too hard. The entire part of negotiation is about just having your numbers down, knowing what your minimum is, knowing what you want, knowing what your walkaway number is, things like that. So we talk all about that piece. And I think also just knowing like what leverage you have, right? Because at the end of the day, you might be willing to take a slightly lower salary if the benefits are a lot better because you have, family members, and you want to make sure that the healthcare premiums are 100% covered. That's a huge bonus, right? That can be worth a lot if you have, a full family and you're sort of like dealing with the realities of trying to pay for healthcare right now and with the premiums and things like that. So just knowing your leverage, knowing where you're at and what's important to you is a big part of that process too. Awesome. And if folks have questions too, feel free to pop those into chat. I'm going to pause for a second, and then we'll talk about the bootcamp part that we run that kicks off in January.
I just saw a couple hand raised, Ian and Shalini. Wasn't sure if you're able to type it in the group chat or Q&A, and then NS, I saw your hand was raised for a while. Not sure if you can just shoot a note or ask your question in Q&A. We definitely want to make sure you get your questions answered. And then, I would love to do a quick pulse check. I know Joe's covered a lot of ground.
Yes,
it's a lot of valuable information. And I wanted to just get a sense for the group, like where, let us know, like, what do you feel you're strong in, or what do you feel are areas that really resonate with you that you're like, yes, I need support in this, definitely. I know one call out in Q&A was sort of creating your own personal value proposition and strengthening that. Other ones could be, I need to dust up my resume. I haven't really done much on it or whatnot, or I know cover letters are required for some jobs, but I don't know how to write it. Would love to hear your feedback. So feel free to just go ahead and pop it in the chat, and with just, like one area that you need support on. And that way we can get an idea of, okay, the group as a whole, maybe these are some of the areas we should definitely zero in on. Would love your feedback.
Yep, for sure. And what areas are people targeting? What industries are you trying to go after, and roles and things like that? I'd love to have people drop that into chat just to get a sense of what folks are interested in. Okay, so let me give you the speed version of, because we're not super salesy people, as Lisa mentioned. We kind of got the sales function. I'm a marketer, so obviously I know how to get people through the process, but I do want to very quickly let you know what you'll get if you decide to join us for the next bootcamp, which is coming up in January. So this is kind of how we run it. It's a job coaching and an accountability program. And the goal is to put together kind of presentations weekly, get people in your corner who know how to do all this stuff. So I talked about, week 1, understanding you, week 2, mastering the fundamentals, week 3, can't remember the topic because my brain can't do more than 2 things. But you remember the process, right? Putting it all together, and you've got interviewing, you've got, kind of like context, understanding stakes, things like that. We want to we always build around that process of helping people go through it and really just like speed up their job search. And so these are the kinds of things that we just like build in. It's highly valuable. The way that we approach it, just so you know, if you decide that the bootcamp is something you want to try, we try to over deliver, right? We want you to walk away from it saying, holy cow, that was so useful and helpful to my job search. I would do it again in a heartbeat. That's the level of value that we will always want to run on it. So the next one's going to run starting in January, on January 24th. We run them every week, 4 p.m. PST, 7 p.m. EST. We record them, share, YouTube, et cetera, but we always tell people you should attend live if you can. That's really important and useful. And we also have a lot of other things that the Alberts List community does. So a lot of folks already do those things, right? You maybe attend some of the Alberts List events. There are free and paid ones. We also have a LinkedIn chat group with your cohort. So everybody works together throughout the week, checking in on interviews, checking in on opportunities, asking questions, et cetera, just so we're staying in touch between the weekly presentations. And we also hook you up with some free tickets to workshops. You get the first shot at our Monday mock interviews, which Albert and Corey Hiramoto run. So you can put yourself on the block and get that kind of good expertise and feedback. And so we run all of this for a super modest price. It's $119 for early bird tickets, which I think are open now through mid-January. We'll drop a link to the Eventbrite in the chat, and you can check it out there too. Yeah, so that's that. I'm not like a heavy duty salesperson. I have one other thing to show you, but let's drop into the chat and see what folks have for questions. I mentioned the other thing I will screen share with you is kind of a pro tip on how to like build in some of your networking around a role that you're applying for. So Phil asked, let's look at some of the questions here. Phil asks how to answer, what is your greatest weakness without shooting yourself in the foot? Love that. I'm just going to show you. There is a interview prep doc that we use in the boot camp, and I think I'll happy to share this with you. I'll put this in the chat after we go through the Q&A here, because we have all these templates and things like that that we're always happy to share with folks. You'll get the most out of it if you actually do the boot camp, but there's no reason you can't get some value out of it here if you need some help with that too. I think the answer to that, Phil, is first of all, know what the question is, know if it's an important question or it's a throwaway question. And a throwaway question is kind of like, what is your greatest weakness? A throwaway question is defined as there's nothing really for you to gain from spending a lot of time on it. And I'll be super real with you. I did not know this until Mike Tomasello, who's a great career coach. He's in the Alberts List community. I asked him, I said, Mike, I'm kind of an honest person. And so when people ask me, what's your biggest weakness? I'm like, I want to be honest, but, I'm also like nervous that I'm going to say too much, et cetera. Shoot myself in the foot, of course. And Mike was like, well, do you have anything to gain by talking a lot in that question? And I was kind of like, yeah, no, not really. So move on, right? But you got to have an answer. So you have to come up with a short, simple answer. So this is an example of one, right? Like, I'm too honest. I'm making a joke. I'm being funny about it. And then I'm saying, yeah, but I can be a perfectionist because I'm a marketer, right? I'll sit there and rewrite the same sentence 8 times. That's, anyone who does copy does that. But the point is that I'm answering this in like 8 seconds and we're moving on, right? You have to answer a question like that, but it's not a question where you have anything to benefit from by spending a lot of time on it. So just know if it's a big question or a throwaway question, and then move yourself right along. Okay, Laura asked, how to respond when people ask in the first interview, what are your salary requirements? Okay, there's 2 ways to do this. And Elisa, chime in right after this too, because I know you have thoughts. The first one is, this is the one that takes some guts, and you got to practice saying this out loud. You can say, I actually typically don't disclose, my salary range, but of course I've done my research and checked the market range. Do you have a salary range in mind for this role? I'm happy to confirm for you if it's kind of in the right neighborhood so that we can just make sure we're valuing both of our time before we move forward. That's it. Answer number 1 to the salary requirements. You don't tell them, but you say, if you tell me your range first, I will tell you if we're close. Meaning that if you tell me that your range is 60 to 80 and my range is 120 to 140, I will just be honest with you and say, it's probably not a fit. I recommend that. Practice that, see if you can do that. If they press you really hard and you absolutely have to give an answer, which is something you want to try to avoid, you can say, well, my range, I've done my homework, of course, and my range is somewhere between X and Y. But as we get deeper into the process and the interview process, I'm happy to talk a little bit more about it because it does depend on what types of benefits and kind of the full compensation package. So in the second answer, you're giving them a real salary answer, but you're saying that they can't quote you on that exact number because you're going to negotiate when the time comes and you're further into the interview. Most of the time, a recruiter will ask this question not necessarily to try to trap you. They will ask it because they would just want to make sure they have the right candidate in the pool who's like interested in the role, and also it's in the right neighborhood for them. So those are the 2 kinds of approaches. Elisa, thoughts? I know you're quite familiar with this one.
No, I think you covered it. I was actually trying to get some answers for the Q&A and just real quick, sorry, it's a little bit of a sidebar, but a lot of folks are asking and direct messaging about the boot camp links. So I'm going to send that in the group chat, but also respond separately. And also the special price, I know Albert said there's a glitch. Right now it's all defaulted to January 26th, but I will follow up and get you answers on that because I know he had set a different timeline for that. Joe, jump in if you know what it is.
Awesome. Yeah, I think you can use any of the tickets. I just popped it up and dropped into chat for folks. So if you're super excited to do the boot camp, you want to sign up, go for it. If you just need a little more information or you want to bookmark that page so you can go back and think about it, I just dropped the link in chat there as well. I think we just need to update it may not be actually easy to update it once it's published, but the early bird ticket should be 119. That's active. So you probably select this one here. And then I think once we get to the week before, this one will expire and there'll be the regular admission one, which is 149. I'm not sure what the late bird is. That might be like the day before or something like that. But for folks on this, just look for the early bird one. It's 119 and select this one when you go through the process, and that'll get you going. So hopefully that answers some of the questions.
Yeah, I think I'm checking in with Albert on that, but I believe starting in the new year, or within the first week, it'll go to the regular admission. So if you feel really confident about it and about kind of resetting and kicking off the new year, we'd love to have you be part of the program. Joe and myself are here to answer any questions you have. If you want to see specifics or get more insight on like areas that's going to be covered, we're happy to go more in depth to make you feel really confident about coming onto the program and seeing what it's all about. But I believe the regular admission goes into effect the first week of January. So the early bird is a good way to start the new year. And that. And then just real quick, okay. Just wanted to answer live. I know Ethan was saying, when's the next boot camp going to be? Just get connected with us. It's going to be sometime in February. We also have some other concurrent industry specific boot camps running. And so Albert's just working on some scheduling, but it's going to be in February.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, and just to note, the one I just dropped a link into chat, which is the next general one we'll run. It's for any industry, any area, any expertise.
And the thing is, if you know what industry you're wanting to go into, like marketing or tech or whatnot, we're happy to get you connected. But if you're not sure yet and you just want to get a sense of the full program, the general bootcamp is a great way to start. Joe and myself will be leading it. And if you decide you want to pivot to something specific like marketing or sales or tech or whatnot, Joe and myself can get you connected to those career coaches or specific resources and help jumpstart you that way. So you get kind of the best of both worlds. You get the general program, which will focus on the fundamentals, resume, cover letter, all that won't change too much across boot camps because those are just kind of the technical aspects of like job search, making sure your resume is up to date and it's very succinct and the story you're telling. But so don't feel like you're missing out if you're like, I signed for the general one, but I wanted the marketing one, or I'm not sure. And we can also help troubleshoot that for you.
Yep, totally. Yeah, for sure. And the boot camps are sort of designed to be like half between like, here's the fundamentals, here's the standard stuff that we really have seen work, especially in the last 2 years, because the job market's changing very rapidly. And then we do the more specialized versions to try to address like, okay, you're a marketer, you're a designer, you're an engineer, your world's a little different. Your interview prep's going to be a little bit different. If you're an engineer and you're, interviewing for one of the FANG companies, that interview section is going to be a little bit different than the rest of us, right? It can be pretty intense trying to whiteboard code and things like that. So there's a little more specialized kind of advice in those types of areas. Okay, cool. So let me answer a couple more questions in the chat. Susanna asked, how do you address career transitions? And do you see those taking place at the management, more senior levels? This is one of those questions that has a kind of, it depends answer. We definitely have this conversation in the boot camps, and it's certainly something that comes up in the Albert's List community a lot. And I think, you do see people switch or change careers. They may change, roles or they may change functions or industries at senior levels. Just as an example, we just had somebody who, knock on wood, I think just got an offer last week, who is moving into a VP of operations for a digital marketing agency. And he came from kind of managing finance and accounting and support operations for like big call center organizations. So he shifted, pretty significantly, but stayed at that senior level. So these are things we see a lot. It's pretty common. A lot of times when you're at that senior level, it's less about like rebooting everything and starting from scratch. And it's more about positioning, right? Like, okay, I have not been the VP of operations of the digital marketing agency, but I have, managed budgets. I have led, kind of the hiring function or I've done a lot of the, growth and product strategy and things like that. So I understand how that would function and I can translate that, right? That's an example. So that's pretty common. And then someone mentioned they're an entry-level UX UI designer and would like tips to write a solid cover letter. Awesome. We do a lot of that. I know folks in Albert's List community are familiar if you've asked that question in the Facebook group, et cetera. Definitely something that we provide in the bootcamp as well. I included a link to the bootcamp here. Let me check the Q&A really quickly. Okay, someone asked if there are a lot of subscribers to the bootcamp. Curious how I will get personalized attention to navigate my career search. Yeah, great question. So the process, like the presentations will stay pretty generalized, but we do a lot of follow-up with these specific folks. So once we get to know you in that first or second week, we're actually usually, you're going to laugh. We're usually saying like, I'm going to DM you. We're going to send you a note and ask like, okay, where are you at? What do you need? Do you need you need coaching? Do you need help with your resume writing? Like, where are you in the process? Because people come from different, different places, particularly if they're making a transition or things like that in their career. So we provide relatively hands-on. We don't do like personalized coaching sessions and things like that. We can certainly recommend and provide, support and say, hey, here's the professionals we would recommend who are career coaches that can do a little more hands-on stuff. So if you really don't know what you're trying to do next in your career, that's where like having a coach can be really helpful. Do the boot camp because it's going to help you accelerate everything, but you probably need a little more hands-on work. So hopefully that kind of helps to answer that question. Someone asked, will the January bootcamp help for software engineering and professional services leadership roles? Yeah, for sure. 100%. We have senior level folks that, especially I think the networking element, and I'll share as we kind of get towards the wrap up, I'll share an example that I mentioned of that. That's definitely something we do. And then somebody asked, what is a job offer obtained by 8 weeks guaranteed? Nope, can't guarantee that. That would be amazing. But I will say that we put a lot into the process, and we have a pretty significant percentage of people that get an offer by that 8, 9, 10 weeks. And if you're struggling at any particular part of the course, we're try to be hands-on and to listen and notice. And if you say, hey, I need some extra help, we're going to try to find a way to help you, because that's our goal. We're not in this to make a ton of scratch. We charge for it, of course, because a good product and service should be charged for, but our goal is to help you accelerate the process. And I think in general, no matter whether you're transitioning your career, you're starting out, you're just trying to level up, whatever it might be, we want you to be able to move in that process so much faster. That's like, if you move 10, 15, 50, 100% faster than you have been, and you're getting more opportunities, you're getting more interviews, et cetera, that's what we measure the success by. But we are pretty ruthless about trying to make sure that people get to some offers by the end of the bootcamp. That's our goal. Let's see. We don't have a limit for the number of attendees for the bootcamp. That was a question. And then someone also asked if there's an opportunity to network with others within the bootcamp. Yeah, for sure. That's absolutely part of the process, is like connecting with people. And we don't force people to do it because not everybody can publicly job search. Like, for example, if you're kind of working already and you need a little bit of help, finding that next role, you might not be able to put on LinkedIn, oh, I'm job searching, right? Because your current boss could see it. But we encourage people to share their story. Like, hey, here's what I'm looking for. I'm in the boot camp and I'm really, enjoying connecting with, tag some people in your boot camp, learn what they're up to, find out what they're up to in their process. Networking with your boot camp folks, your cohort are really great thing to do. Yeah, go for it.
Okay, a couple of questions in chat. Sorry, I've just
Oh
been
yeah, go
typing
for
and
it.
responding to the Q&A, but I want to make
Awesome.
sure the other chat is handled. So stats on hiring percentage, and then, oh,
Well,
never
is
mind.
that a question about, Rodney, if you could just confirm in chat, is that a question about the percentage of people from the bootcamp that get hired or something else? Okay, yes. Yeah, it's, I think I'd have to go back and update it because we're just finishing. It's probably about 30 to 45%, somewhere in that. I need to go back and look at it, but yeah, at least a third of people that go through the bootcamp that show up every week are getting offers and locking it down by the end of that usually 8 weeks, 9 weeks, 10 weeks. So it's a pretty high percentage. Now, I'll be honest with you, it's a process. Not everybody shows up every week. And that's part of that commitment piece. Like if you do all these things and you show up, like the people that we see that are like, I'm going to commit to being here every week, I'm going to commit to doing all the things that are recommended, those people get job offers. I can just tell you that with certainty. We have a bunch in our current cohort. They did it, and some of them went above and beyond, right? They're doing way more, right? They're really committed to it. They're getting job offers right now. So if you do the whole thing and really lock it down, you're gonna do well. And certainly, that depends on like how sure you are about where you want to go, and some of the early stuff, right? Like if you know what your goal is, it gets a lot easier. If you're still kind of working out some of those details, it can be hard.
Yeah, I mean, we do have some information on, post boot camp, some hiring information and, kind of the breakdown, but it's hard to say because it depends on each job seeker, where they're at. Some people are actively seeking, others are sort of just, passive, trying to get an understanding of, what's their value in the marketplace. So they might not be looking as, diligently or, just actively looking, so to speak. And so depending on the breakdown of the boot camp, the percentages might be a little bit different. But definitely, to Joe's point, if you come every week, really engaged, ready to learn, motivated to make a change, whether it's a transition or exploring a second career, we do everything we can to make sure you're supported in that.
Awesome. Yep, definitely. All right, let me show, for folks who are still on, Easter egg. If anybody loves comics, comic books, and comic book based movies, and a lot of movies, at the end, if there's a potential sequel, you might get a little preview. I mentioned that there's a kind of a sweet little pro tip, so I'm going to screen share that with you before I close this window. Just a note about this interview prep doc. This is one we share with everybody in the bootcamp. I know a few folks are in it because I shared the link. Feel free to go to File and make a copy, and make yourself a Google Drive copy, and then update it. There's a lot in here that you can use to update for your job search. I've used this for my own job search. And it definitely works. It will help you kind of short circuit the process. But remember, it has to be in your own voice. So you might need to go in here, like update some of the ways in which you answer things, right? Because you and I are going to answer it differently. Elisa's going to answer it differently. Albert's going to answer it differently. But use this job prep doc. If you don't have a job prep doc, make sure you have one. It doesn't have to be exactly like this, but you should have a good sense of how you're going to answer these questions. And in fact, especially this one, tell me about yourself, which is sort of like this dreaded question that we're all like, oh my God, I have to tell, how do I answer that question in like 90 seconds? This is one we, in the last couple of cohorts, we've really boiled down. And so there's some good info here in the Muse. There's a Loom, which I created, which is how to answer this question, and how there's a couple of examples for a Salesforce job, and then a job at Cedars-Sinai, which is a medical center down in Los Angeles. So very specific, good advice about how to answer that question. And really, this is the kind of question, if you can answer this question well, tell me about yourself, it will connect to everything else, right? It will help people understand who you are, so that even if you're further in the interview process, well, I think I may have mentioned it earlier in the interview or in the last interview, but I'm really passionate about X because in my early years in college or working in whatever industry, I had this experience that really impacted me and made me want to do this kind of work more. So having an answer to this question is a really great one. So make yourself a copy of this if you don't have one. This is just free, open source. Take advantage of it, knock yourself out. Another doc that we use is kind of like a templates for outreach. And so I mentioned, this is the Easter egg for everybody still on. Love it. Glad to have you on. Thanks for sticking around. I mentioned a little bit earlier that most people really don't do outreach around their job. So let me just show you what I mean by that. Let's say you find a job at Deal. If anybody knows Deal, Deal is this fully remote company that tries to help other fully remote companies create their back office. So, operations, hiring, things like that. So let's say you find a role at a company like Deal. This is a cool company, by the way. So if you don't know about it, go check them out. DEEL. Let's say you find a job there under growth, and I'm going to pick growth because that's my area, growth and marketing. There we go. Okay. So first of all, you can figure out this is how you do outreach around a job, by the way. You should do this for every job you really want. If you don't care about the job and it doesn't matter to you, don't do it. I'm being a little sarcastic, but if you really are like, man, this role is awesome, you should do what I'm about to show you. So first of all, you check the team area and you try to figure out who the hiring manager is. You do this. So director of growth. Bingo. There we go. There they are on LinkedIn. So now you have a pretty good sense of either who your hiring manager is, and it depends on what level you're at, right? Like this is the director of growth. It might load. Yeah, here you go. Cool. But you can also look up things like, growth manager. I don't know if this is a real job title at Deal, but we're going to find out very quickly. There's probably not. Let's see who VP growth. Here's another one you can run. Oops, sorry. VP of growth, Deal. They don't have a VP yet. Okay, so it's still a startup, right? They'll probably hire a VP at some point. Operation, manager, titles like this, right? You can figure out who you would work with, for, or around. Another way to do it is really easy, is just to be like, okay, let's say I'm applying for a marketing manager job. Let me see if I can find somebody at the company who is in that same role. So marketing manager Deal, there's your role, there's the company name, search. My Wi-Fi is working pretty fast for a change, thank the good Lord. Let's see, paid marketing manager. It's probably performance marketing. Okay, I'll show you in a second. Here we go. Okay, so this is an example of two people. Okay, so I'm applying for a marketing manager role, assumably at Deal, and I found the hiring manager, probably who's the head of growth or whatnot. This person is they've been there for 5 months. They're probably sitting in the same kind of role that I would be sitting in, marketing manager. This person is the senior performance marketing manager at Deal. If you're not familiar, performance marketing is just paid marketing, like paid ads. So this is somebody that you probably be collaborating with, working with somewhat regularly on projects. This might be somebody that you work with quite closely. I don't know how they might break it up by regions. I'm not sure. But you learn about these people really quickly. Okay, this individual has been a marketing manager, but they pivoted from business development to marketing. Cool, clocked that. This person has been doing performance marketing for a while there. They've been there for about 8 months. Okay, cool. Why am I looking this information up? Well, because I have an outreach doc that I can use. This has some really cool stuff in it. I'll drop this in the chat as well. Just some very specific little things that you can say. You can DM them. And the way that I always look at this is it's called the power of the small ask, right? Ideally you look at a job and you're like, oh my God, I want to be the marketing manager at Deal or whatever the role is. You look up the company, you see if you have any connections. You should do that, right? See if you can get a referral in, DM somebody you know, but let's say you don't, right? Or let's say you only have one person. You can still do these kinds of little asks here. You can say, hey, Marvin, DM, hey, Marvin, would you be open to a quick question? I noticed you're at Deal. I'm thinking about a role there. Very short, very small ask. Marvin can say, yeah, for sure, go ahead. Or they might not respond because sometimes people don't respond. Or they might say, I don't have time. Cool, no problem. But if you DM, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people around the role, that marketing manager role that you want, with some very small asks, like you don't say, hey, I'd love to talk to you for an hour on Zoom. They don't know you. So they're not going to feel great about, taking a first date that's an hour long, right? And I use the dating analogy a lot, right? Just, you're on that first date. Like we talk about this in the boot camp all the time. It's kind of a fundamental of networking. If you're on a first date, you don't tell the person that you're on a first date with like, well, let me tell you all about how my parent disappointed me from a young age and I just can't stand them. And I've really been, I have an axe to grind. Like someone doesn't know you. So you got to start a lot smaller, right? You got to build the relationship. And so if you use small asks, around every job that you really do want, wow, I'm going to apply for this job. It seems like a great fit. Use these kinds of small asks. Just figure out where they are. Email them if you can. DM them if they're active on social, especially LinkedIn. And keep the ask small. And by the way, they might say like, yeah, okay, sure, go for it, shoot. Or hey, I'd be happy to hop on a call next week if you want to, or send me a calendar invite. And then as soon as they do answer it, then you say, wow, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. That was helpful. I think I'm going to apply for this role. Would it be okay if I looped back if I had another question? That's another small ask. You're being respectful, right? You're valuing their time, but you're building that relationship. And so what happens if you're doing it really well, right? If you're sort of being consistent, and again, like I was saying before, most people are not going to do this. I'm just being real with you. Most people are not going to do what I just described. But if you do it, if you take the time to do this around the roles you want with 6, 8, 10 people who maybe are on that team or might work with that team, you will get a few of them, right? You'll get a couple or 3, and then 2 things will happen. You will get insights on the role that you can use in interviews. Oh, well, I've heard that the culture really focuses on autonomy. Like I was talking about Discord earlier. Cool. Now you're having a conversation with them, right? I know that includes things like X, Y, and Z because you got some insight from one of the people that you DM'd. So you will actually do better in the interviews if you do this, right? You will do better. And you'll also know what your expectations are for your role, what the internal ways we work are. So if you get hired, you'll even be able to onboard faster. So great for that process. The other thing that happens is it just puts you in the room, right? Because recruiters, hiring managers, people in teams that are going to do panel interviews, they have a conversation and they say, oh, God, we've got that interview next week with some folks. Hey, how did it go? Yeah, I think we've got some good candidates. We've got 5 or 8 or 10 people. Oh yeah, that like Lorenzo, that one candidate, are we looking at him? Because he DM'd me. He had a really great question. He asked a really thoughtful question about deal. You could put yourself in that room, right? By having that. So there's so much you can gain by doing this. And yes, some people would call this networking. I don't really worry about what it's called, but it can be really helpful. So here you go. Pro tip to do this stuff. I'll drop this in chat as well. And then we'll see if there are any other questions. Oops, I don't want to copy this, although you can copy this doc as well too. Let me pop this up and then we'll do one last run through of the chat and the Q&A. Lisa, anything you want to queue up for me? While I'm doing.
No, I was going to say there's a couple of questions and I was hoping we could address it live. So there's a couple of folks that are asking about, I'm just going to answer it live. How many people in a cohort? So right now we're planning for 20 in a cohort, but that may change depending on group needs. But just wanted to iterate, when you're part of the program, Joe, myself, and Albert, we work personally with you. So if there's specific gap areas that you have, or you need support or training, or just want to do some workshopping, we're happy to set up a one-on-one session with you. So if there's a topic that's not covered in our group meetings, our weekly meetings, just know that option's always out there, and we always do check in regularly as well.
Yep,
so
love that.
And the group setting, we have it set at 20, but that might change. And the other benefit to being part of the group is a lot of folks like to be able to hear from other job seekers, what they're doing, what they're encountering. And so, as Joe mentioned, we have that set up as a LinkedIn group right now. And that also is the dual purposes. We want to get people more active on LinkedIn and utilizing it, sort of like flexing a muscle. So that's also part of it. So for those that are wanting a smaller, intimate group, just wanted to share a couple of insights why we have the program structured this way.
Yeah, for sure. And like, I also kind of want to share too, because I think it touches on that too a little bit, is, we try to make sure that the process works for folks who have a varying number of different learning styles. So, if you're a little more introverted and you're not like in love with the idea of doing a Zoom and being on video every week, that's okay. You can hang out in the chat, no problem. Like, just listen on audio, right? And so we have folks that do that. And we want you to be engaged. We want you to get a lot out of it. But we also know that, not everybody approaches like networking, for example, in the same way. You might have different feelings about it. And that's okay. That's totally cool. Again, the process that we want to go through is to accelerate people, and have a good experience. And I saw that Moy chimed in the chat too. Moy was in one of our recent boot camps and I think found it valuable. So if you want to ask like a tough, real question, connect with Moy and say like, hey, really, what was the deal with the boot camp? Did it really help you or not? And I'm sure one will tell you the truth. It helped here, it didn't help here. It's always good to be honest about that stuff. So definitely. Okay, let's look through the Q&A and make sure that we answered any
I'm answering some
last...
of them. I'm typing some of them in just because some of them might need like sort of a longer answer. But a couple of folks are asking about, is the boot camp able to help international job seekers, visa sponsorships, and is it only targeted at people living in the US? And just want to lump those two together. So the boot camp is really for any job seeker that's looking to job seek more efficiently, hone up some of the resume, cover letter, writing skills. So again, the class is going to be led in English, and that's where a lot of the resources will be, but we're open to helping anyone, whether you're in the US or abroad, job search in a more efficient way. So we do not help with sponsorship or visa, any of those issues or concerns. We don't have expertise in that, and so we don't want to speak out of turn in terms of how to get sponsored, hired, and those specifics. But if it's other areas like job search, resume, cover letter, networking, branding, we're happy to support you there.
Yep. And I would add to that the Alberts List community has a lot of folks who have expertise in this particular area, right? Like international students and or international job seekers. And so this is the kind of thing where it's great to reach out to the community, post in the Facebook group, make that ask to say, hey, has anyone gone through this before? Because the answer is yes, they totally have. And so there's lots of great advice from folks. Albert, as Elisa was saying, Elisa and I are not experts on visa sponsorships and how that works. Of course, we know a little bit about it because we pay attention, listen to the community, but find some folks who've gone through that before. That's a great way to make sure that it helps you with any specific questions about your own situation. And of course, we can help with a lot of the other fundamental stuff too.
Awesome.
Someone asked, Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Lisa.
No, I was going to, say like, that's the next one sort of, I know they've been asking about it. It's just insider info about FANG hiring practices, open positions. Is it actually open, or is it more for, restructured teams or a reduction force, that type of thing. And I don't know, it's hard to take a personal stance on it, because I've heard some teams say like, no, we actually are hiring, and we do hire a lot externally. Others where, like you said, those roles are up for grabs. So if there are teams that are being restructured and there are internal employees applying, obviously they're strong candidates because they're already working for the company. So it's hard to kind of weigh in on this without knowing like the specific team or the company, the circumstances. But our program does help you in getting closer to, whatever it is, the job that you're looking for, and having a more structured and rigor approach around it. So that's what we are committed to doing, and how the program will work. It won't help you around this potential obstacle, because we don't have like insider info on like, oh, hey, this is the job you're looking for, and this is what our take is on it. Our program is strictly on just helping you be more familiar with our process, because we've seen it work for other candidates, and we want to make sure that everyone has access to that information. Let me know if that makes sense. And sorry, addressing the last point is trying to get into tech from a non-tech background, you're definitely in the right spot. We have a ton of folks that reach out all the time trying to get into tech, and that is something that we will specifically cover.
Yeah. And so, by the way, for folks who might not be familiar with what FANG means, it's just if you're getting hired at one of the big tech companies, so it stands for Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. They have very rigorous hiring practices. And as Lisa was mentioning, it varies. What I would say is positioning is everything. So, and especially that last point of getting into tech from a non-tech background, like I was just on a Twitter Spaces, and by the way, if this is you want to get into FANG, you should really be following Kanika Tolliver. We'll just give you this tip right now. Okay. Sorry, Kanika Tolliver. She's on LinkedIn as well, but she's super active on Twitter. Look her up, and the reason I say that is because she runs these incredible Twitter live spaces, and she knows a lot of people who are working at Apple, they're working at Google, they're working at, one of the FANG companies. And she does these great Twitter live spaces and puts them on these, and she had one today, actually. I forgot about that. It happened a little bit earlier. Anyway, she gets people from these companies on, and you can hear from them directly and they'll answer questions like this, like, how did you become the head of product management at Google unit X, whatever area. So great resource to get onto. I'll drop that into the chat while I'm looking here. Definitely get there. Oops, sorry. And then one other thing just to mention too on that, because I do have a little bit of insight from hearing from folks that I know who work in those units. As Elisa said, it does depend a little bit. Each of the big tech companies has a different process. I think the just to give you the real straight up deal, we don't know the answer to it, of course, but go find yourself a person and make the right ask from them. Like do your research on somebody who works at Netflix. Find some people at Netflix who pivoted from one industry to another, and then send them a message that says, hey, hey, Tarana, or, hey, Maria, hey, Jim, I noticed you went from X to Y. Would you be open to, one or two very quick questions by DM about how you did that? I'm trying to do that. Like, here's my LinkedIn profile. Keep the ask small, ask them how they did it. They'll probably tell you. A lot of times it is about positioning, especially if you're have a lot of experience, but you're trying to switch, from one radical area to another. Positioning is really important. So I'll add that extra little bit that I think that's the way to do it, right? And if you can find somebody who's been there and done that, they're going to give you much better advice for that team or that unit than anybody out there, like myself, or maybe a career coach who's going to give you good generalized advice. But these are very specific teams at these big tech companies, and you want to get very specific advice for that scenario. Someone asked, what's the 3K number mentioned? That's the approximate value of the whole boot camp. If you paid for all these services separately, it costs you probably about $3,000. We just did back of the envelope math for that. So, and again, that kind of comes from the same concept of we're here to over deliver. We want to make sure you walk away and go, wow, I got way more value than I thought I would, because that's just how we operate as a team. We want you to be supported.
Yeah. The next one is core differences. So this has come up a couple of times, between the boot camp, the general boot camp we're talking about, and then the other specific ones. I know there's a marketing boot camp, and there's also a recruiting boot camp that's coming up. So I just covered this briefly in another one, but the general topics like resume writing, cover letter, templates, branding, networking, how to utilize LinkedIn, offer letters, a lot of those core topics are going to be the same across the boot camps, but you'll get a little bit more, and Joe will have insight on this, on the marketing and recruiting ones. Those will go into specifics for those industries. So marketing, it might go into deep dives of the different areas of marketing that might be of interest for folks looking into transitioning or moving up in that industry, digital marketing, marketing analytics, et cetera. And then recruiting, that one is a little bit more specific. It's for folks that are looking to transition into recruiting or move up in that. If you're interested in HR, that could also be a good fit. Or if you're not sure yet, you can always sign up for the general one, and we can get you connected with specific resources once you want to have a little bit more focus on the vertical.
Yeah. Okay, Lee asked, you mentioned 20 participants in a cohort. How many cohorts are running at the same time? What we've been doing with the bootcamp is usually each cohort's about 20 to 30 people. And if it goes way over that, we might have to split it into a couple cohorts. We haven't run into that situation quite yet.
Yeah.
If we had 600 people on one bootcamp, going back to a question somebody asked earlier, I don't know that we would be able to do very personalized. So we do try to limit it. And we want it to be sort of a good sized group, because there is a lot of good that comes from seeing people and connecting people who are doing, things around you in the job search. There's a lot of benefit to having peers in the process, right? And I mentioned how important that is too, to have those sources of support at the beginning that we were talking about. But we also don't want it to be huge. So the answer to that is sort of we're probably going to continue to wait and see. But if it becomes a super large group, then we might split it into two cohorts if that happens.
Yeah, it just kind of depends. But I know a couple of the concerns that came up was I'm looking for very individualized support. And I would say that the group works in tandem. So you're part of the cohort. And as Joe mentioned, there's a lot of power in being part of the group. There's a lot of good energy that goes around. You get tips and you learn from 20 other individuals that are also in similar stages in your life where they've committed to making a change, or they're wanting to job search or go after specific goals. So as a group, you'll learn, we'll cover topics. But like I said, if you're needing specific support in a certain area, gaps, Joe and myself would work with you. So don't worry about it. If you feel like it's going to be a big group, you're going to get lost. That will not be the case if you show up week in, week out. We will definitely be there to make sure you get where you'd like to be, or at least we can connect you with those coaches or resources.
Yeah, we're pretty serious, and if you reach out, we're gonna find a way to help you. I love this question from Melissa, and I think Lisa, you and I could both answer this one.
Yeah.
But Melissa, would you do us a solid and also tell us in the chat what your like industry area is and like function is, like marketing and sports, or whatever the areas are? I think we'd love to kind of know that too. Oh, UX writer. Awesome. Yeah. So, okay. So this is a great question. I'll answer it really quickly in my own take, and then Lisa, you can kind of get there. Oh, it just depends. So sorry, I know nobody wants to hear that. What are we seeing right now as far as on-site positions versus remote versus hybrid? You're in UX, so you've got kind of leg up. There's not really a whole lot that you do that would like absolutely 100% have to happen in person, although obviously it depends on the company, the industry. Some people really prioritize being able to put sticky notes on the, on the design board, whiteboard in the office. It's not always required because there are things called Miro boards and other jam boards and things like that. So it's not like as much of a challenge to get a remote role or like a hybrid role. If you're in a tech industry that's like, or vertical, that's vertical and or role function that's, very, very much online already. I don't think in your particular case, Melissa, it would be a huge hindrance when you're, looking for those types of roles. Overall, the bigger question that everyone wants to know is like, how is all that going to shake out? And we don't know yet, because it does depend on the market leaders. You have some really huge companies, like some of the big four consulting companies like Deloitte, et cetera, have said, we're going to go remote permanently. We're not going back. Whereas Google was, up until I think probably right about now, saying like, we're going to go back to the office in January. Probably not going to happen now. Well, I hope not, because, I'm assuming they're watching the Omicron variant and its current health science challenge for all of us. So, there's still some stuff shaking out there. What I would say is that it's just important to kind of know what's your priority is and your preferences, and like narrow your job search in there. Like, I think because the job market is really tight, and especially if you're in a very specialized field, you have a lot of leverage as a job seeker. And most companies are going to, if they really need the talent, they're going to find a way to make it work. If you're like, yeah, I don't really want to be in the office, or I don't want to be in the office that much. So that's my answer to that. Sorry, it's not more specified, but what are your thoughts, Elisa?
Yeah, basically it's like what I think for 2022 is, and again, I could just, Mother Nature will just knock me off my socks, when the variant takes a different turn. But the trend seems to be in 2022 that it's going to be a hybrid working model. So a couple days in the office and then a couple days working remote. But that said, I feel like as a job seeker, if you're pretty upfront about your needs or where you're at, most companies are willing to accommodate because they know that the workspace has changed a lot, and professionals, there's a lot going on at home. There's a lot in terms of work-life balance. And so they're more than willing to accommodate. So even if a role says a specific area, but it's something that you feel like you're a great fit for, I would just go ahead and apply anyway. And like Joe said, and we have a couple of tips on this because I'm in sales, try to get to the recruiter or hiring manager just to get an idea of, okay, what accommodations they can make. Because you never know if you're the right candidate. It's all up for discussion.
Yeah. And a lot of times, like just to kind of add to that a little bit, like if you are doing a lot of that core work that we talked about, like in the presentation, just kind of that we go through in the boot camp, like if you get your positioning well, if you describe why you're the right fit, if you can really describe your path, where you're headed, why, I call it the why now. Like if, what was that other doc? Outreach. Sorry, I can't remember the other doc I showed you all earlier. What was it? Which one?
Yeah, there's a couple of ones in that.
My brain has decided to turn off, apparently. Can't remember my own. Outreach and templates. No.
Yeah.
Oh, here we go. Interview prep. Yeah, of course. If you can answer that question that I was kind of mentioning, like tell me about yourself, like which is really secretly why this role, why now, which I talk about more here in this recorded video or Loom. But this question is, and I'm going to come back to the question here in a second, I promise. If you, this question here is this is a secret question here. They don't actually want you to tell them that you like to go swimming on Friday nights. They don't need to know that. I mean, maybe you can add that, but this question is really asking like, hey, it's so good to see you across the table or across the Zoom table. Like, why are you here? Like, why this role? Like, and why now? Like, and they're really asking you, cool, where are you at in your career? What are you up to? And like, why are we having this conversation? Like, what should I know about you that will help me understand how you would work here, why you're a great fit, why this role really fits your long-term plan and what you're hoping to do next. Like it's actually not as scary a question as it sounds, right? But there is kind of this hidden question. And if you can kind of answer this question in a very real way, and you've done your homework on the company and you're sort of going through all the stuff that, Lisa and I've been talking about and doing your homework and all that, then you're going to be in a different position where your value is going to be immense. And once you're talking about your value and your ability to just slot in and really dig in and do great work and understand the context and understand the team and the company and the goals, a lot of the other stuff becomes more flexible. The salary, unless they have some super strict range, the salary becomes more flexible. The location, the flex hybrid, et cetera, becomes flexible because they're like, wow, this person really gets our mission. They get our context. They know what we're trying to figure out right now. And we're part of their plan too, right? What they want to do next is exactly what we're hoping this role will do. The conversation changes when you get yourself to that place.
Yeah.
Cool. Y'all are awesome. You really hung in there. I think we're almost done with it. Yes, Melissa, thank you. We're glad to. That was a great question. I'm so glad you asked that one. All right, one last question, and then I guess we'll wrap it up.
So this one we are working on. All three of us, we want to put something together because there are quite a few folks that are interested in roles and becoming PMs or switching to it. And then product management. There's a lot of programs that seed into that in the tech space. So that's kind of a vertical that a lot of folks are interested in. So just be on the lookout for that. If you have immediate needs or you want to get started, you can also connect with us and we can get you connected to some resources. I know Job Hackers is a good one to follow. They have a Scrum program. They also have some PM resources. And then this is more women in tech specific for women professionals that are looking into getting into project management and some others. There's some LinkedIn groups that are very active in posting jobs as well as training specific to those verticals. So we don't have anything official right now, but we're working on it, but would be great to plug you in on some resources to get started if that is of interest. Joe and myself, we put our LinkedIn contacts on there. Feel free to just shoot us a question if anything else comes up. I know this is kind of a lot. Thanks for hanging in there for an hour and a half.
Yes, we really did the whole thing.
Yeah, and like I said, don't feel like you just need to reach out to us for a question too. I mean, we're also humans. I love Joe's tagline. That's part of his LinkedIn headline. We also want to get to know you, like where you're at in your journey, and like how we can add value for you just from a personal and professional standpoint. So don't be shy. We want to hear from you and stay connected as well and support you. Thanks so much for attending our session and hope to see you in 2022.
Yeah, we love it. Thank you. Well said, Lisa. Thank you all for being here. And we really appreciate you. We know that job seeking, it is hard. It's hard work. So thanks for joining us. And we're really glad to be part of your journey in whatever way we can, whether you join us for the boot camp or you pass along a little bit of knowledge from tonight to someone else to help too. Like it's a team sport, right? For sure.
Thanks much. I'm going to go ahead and close out the session. But like I said, connect with both of us. We'll also be sending out program information as well as the recording following this. But any other questions come up or you'd like to just get to know us, please don't be shy. And again, hope you have a good start to the holiday season and stay safe out there.
See you, everybody.